Welcome to Surviving the Black Church podcast, where we shed light and bring awareness to religious trauma and dismantle oppressive systems within the Black church.
On this week's episode of Surviving the Black Church, entitled Let's Talk About Religious Trauma Part 1, Jonathan, Hugh, and I discuss the positive and negative impact that religion can have on our lives. We also discuss the strong religious and Christian orientation that many in the Black community hold. We discuss what it's like becoming aware of religious abuse and trauma within the Black church. We delve deep in confronting various lies that hinder our ability to acknowledge religious trauma within our community. All of this and so much more is covered on this episode. So now, stay tuned. Here is episode 2. Let's talk about religious trauma, part 1.
The Surviving the Black Church podcast represents the views and opinions of Jonathan Carrington, Nikki G., Hugh Kelly, and their guests to the show. The content here should not be taken as clinical advice. In no way does listening, reading, emailing, or interacting on social media with our content establishes a therapist-client relationship. The content here is for informational purposes only. And because each person is unique, please consult your healthcare professional for any clinical questions. All right. Hello, my name is Jonathan Carrington, and you are listening to Surviving the Black Church. And I am joined with my co-hosts today, Nikki G and Hugh Kelly. Yay. Hello. Today, we're going to be talking about, this is our second episode, we're going to be talking about religious trauma. We're going to start discussing the topic of religious trauma. And I know that this is a topic. Religion and politics are touchy subjects for a lot of people. And I know that it's a subject that can be very activating for some people to talk about. And even just in our culture and our society, it's like when we talk about these two things, politics and religion, it's like off limits.
Yes.
And you know what I mean, right?
Uh-huh.
So it's like,
Yeah.
you can't talk about it. And, I know there's a quote, it's like, what is it? Don't bring your faith into the public square where I can see it. I remember that quote. In other words, pretty much saying, hide your faith outside of your place of worship because of the whole separation in church situation.
Yeah.
Don't talk about it, but feel it and live it and breathe it every moment of every day.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. It's something that is, especially religion, it's something that's really deep and very personal to a lot of people, because it's also something that we care about. We're passionate about it. It's a topic that is just very, very intimate to us.
Sure.
But and I'm just curious to know what you all think about this in the context of religious trauma. It can be very polarizing to talk about religion.
Yeah.
It can be polarizing. It could separate people. It can cause arguments.
Mm-hmm.
It can cause debate. And I know that this is a topic that we both feel very strongly about.
Mm-hmm.
And wanted to get both your thoughts about what I just shared about just kind of like the subject matter of religion and talking about it and broaching the topic. I just want to just kind of start there.
Well, yes, especially in the year 2022, religion definitely is a big deal. And ironically, as taboo as the topic may be, I feel like we're in a place and space in our country, particularly, where people are starting to be a little bit more vocal about religion, and it's causing a lot of different emotions for some. And in some family contexts, a lot of people are finding themselves being more separated and divided from their families than united because of religion. Now, obviously, this is why a lot of people say, hey, don't touch it. Come to Thanksgiving and let's turn on something else. Let's not talk about what's going on politically and what's going on within religious context. But, I think it's time to talk about it. I think there are a lot of people who have experienced a lot of hurt and pain and separation from people that they love because of politics and because of religion. And we have to find a way to talk about it in a therapeutic way, in a healing way, and understand that there are differences of opinion and there are different experiences that we've had. And so, we are touching this topic today tenderly, understanding that there are a myriad of opinions and belief systems. But we want to touch this topic courageously and understanding the necessity of doing it in 2022.
Yeah, 100%. Hugh, what do you think? What do you think about broaching the topic of religion and politics, or all of it? What do you think about it?
Yeah. I think a lot about it. I mean, I think it's one of those things where, as y'all were saying, it's super taboo. Don't talk about it, but it has an overreaching arch into like literally almost every aspect of your life, whether or not you know it or not. I mean, so it's one of those things where you live it and breathe it, even if you don't live it and breathe it. And so it's time that we pulled the rug up underneath so much of the just the subterfuge of hiding behind people don't talk about it, like they go, don't talk about this at Thanksgiving, but then go pray. And you can go to Starbucks and somebody will say, I'll pray for that for you, pray on that for you, or something like that. Or uh, just so many different ways that it's kind of makes it religion makes its way known. I mean, I was on the subway the other day and I was just sitting, and I get approached by these Mormons for some type of religious conversion thing. And I mean, so I mean, you can't really, it's something you can't really avoid. And so, but you can't talk about it. And so I think that's so crazy
So true.
that you just can't talk about it. So I'm so delighted and happy to be here, to be in this space and sharing our experiences, so that we know what we're going through is real, and what you are going through is real. And if you never talk about it, you can't get any grounding in reality on what you're going through,
That's right.
and whether it's for you or whether it's not for you. And so I'm so happy to be here today to talk about this.
Yeah, I'm glad that you shared that. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I think, um, as a mental health professional, and I'm sure, you both can attest to this, to that, like there's been a lot of just exciting conversations, but also just more so the reason why this particular topic around religious trauma got my attention. It was because of the pandemic, and people were coming to me with all different types of issues and problems, just as a clinician. But what I have been noticing is that there are many Black churchgoers and Black parishioners, or just congregants, who are now, especially during the pandemic, using their voice and speaking up about, and using their voice, speaking up to the church's just failure to acknowledge their pain, their hurt, their suffering. Also, there's people who have expressed how the church has not really been responsive or ignored some of what has been going on with just the racism, the George Floyd, the
Hmm.
health disparities, health inequities, COVID, all of
Yep.
what's going on, and
Hmm.
how it's impacting the Black community right now.
Yep.
Uh-huh.
Um,
Yep.
so you have people who are expressing their voice that way. Also, you have people who are just historically hurt by the church's silence on many issues that are affecting society and affecting culture. And as a result, you have this movement that's happening in silence. People who are slowly but surely moving away from the church, people who are leaving the fold, and people who are looking for other forms of healing, other forms of um, just treatment or whatever it is that they are looking for. They're looking to find out, how am I going to take this hurt, take this
Yeah.
pain, take this suffering, and get what I need. That's pretty
Mm-hmm.
much what it is.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
And I want to get y'all's feedback on this, but like for me, it's not even about me just sharing that. That was not about me saying demonizing or condemning the Black church. That's not what I'm saying. What I want to do with this particular episode, I want to be able to offer um help the audience offer a more balanced perspective on what the experience is,
Mm-hmm.
particularly the experience of religious trauma, and also how it's affecting Black people. What I am not saying is that religion itself is a mental illness. I'm not saying that.
Right.
I
Right.
am not
Yeah.
saying that um, religion itself is always traumatic. That's not what I'm saying about religious trauma.
Right.
I
Hmm.
am not here to blame the church. I'm not here to shame the church. I'm not here to condemn the church.
Mm-hmm.
Because ideally, there is no such thing as a perfect church, perfect institution, perfect environment. That's not what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm. Right.
There are a lot of mentally healthy people
Mm-hmm.
who go to church, who believe in their religion, who participate in religion. That's what I am saying. There are
Mm-hmm.
people who, you know, practice all types of religions. Some religions offer positive mental health benefits. I will say that for the record. But I want
Mm-hmm.
to I want to give you both the floor now, because I know now we're going into this territory. I'm just curious. What do y'all think?
Well, yeah, I mean, religion for some people has worked for them, particularly within the Black church. There's so many historical lampposts, if you will, for us as a people with the Black church. And it has been beneficial in so many ways. We will get deeper into the historical aspects of the Black church in future podcast episodes. But for some, it has worked, and it has worked for them personally, generationally. And we are not here to, shame, blame, or judge the church. But we are here to talk about what happens when religion, or particularly the church, is, harming and not helping. And for some people, that is their experience. And we want those to know that their experiences are being heard and being spoken about, because it is happening a whole lot more than people realize. But yes, everybody's experience is different when it comes to religion. We already talked about how this is a taboo topic. But in any event, we do want to honor those who the church has worked for them. But for those who it hasn't, we're here for you today.
Yes.
Exactly. Oh, I was just going to say, I just think that I don't think that religion is some sort of mental. I do think the current white supremacist overreaching bastardization of Christianity certainly is demented, but I don't think that spirituality and religion itself is something to be shamed or blamed, or I think currently I think sometimes that I've heard this question before, like, is you know spirituality for Black people, given you know how it's currently, why it's currently the way it is, and I think it is, spirituality is for Black people. I just have I'm just really the European influence, not just influence, but the European domination on how we currently practice our spirituality in the Black church is something that really needs to be addressed and unpacked. And so yeah, because I think spirituality is something that is beneficial. It's healthy. It helps me understand something outside of myself, and it's that there's so much in this world that I'll never be able to understand, and so in this life that I'll never be able to understand. And so I definitely feel like religion per se, and I'm probably getting the terms all wrong, but uh there's another word that I'm looking for that's not coming to me in my head right now. But I don't think that, religion is something that should be condemned, or, it's not for you and don't do it, or blah, blah, blah. I think we are all reasonable adults. And we can all kind of, come to our own conclusions about what works for us. But we are not here to say that religion is bad or not good for you. We are here to currently talk about the current climate that is, not really, that's not really built for us, and not really, it's not really built for us. And we're here to kind of figure out how can we move forward and be able to practice, in a way that is for us. And so, yeah.
Yes, for sure, for sure. And I think, us helping the audience and the listener to offer the balance in regards to not providing a biased perspective, but a balanced perspective on
Mm-hmm.
the number of positive and negative mental health uh, effects of associated with religion. And I think that will help us to offer the listener a more balanced perspective on it, instead of just moving into this orientation of like, because a lot of people have been so dependent upon their religion for their own sake of survival. And so we
Right.
can't
Mm-hmm.
remove, it's very difficult to remove something that you've been dependent upon for the majority of your life,
Mhm.
and then expect it to figure out how to then resource yourself in terms of like resources, meaning
Mm-hmm.
the things, the actions, the qualities that you can draw on
Mhm. Mhm.
for aid and assistance in times of need.
Right.
So therapeutically, there has to be something that is supporting a human being,
Mm-hmm.
whether it be actions, awareness, ability that supports a human being, a person, in maintaining their sense of self, in
Right.
maintaining their sense of autonomy, in
Mhm.
maintaining their sense of competency, regardless of whatever it is occurring in their environment. And there's different types of resources that human beings have, like psychological, emotional,
Mhm. Mhm.
Exactly.
intellectual, spiritual,
Mm-hmm.
artistic, relational, whatever the case may be. And so when you think about the church or the religion itself, for some people, it has offered a sense of community and belonging. We talked about that in the previous episode in terms of the need to reach out for religion, because it provides that sense of community with people who maybe share a belief system,
Mhm.
and an opportunity that's been set up that offers that community and belonging for people who might be suffering from a sense of loneliness and isolation. So on a basic level, that's the function of
Mhm.
religion. from a positive. Even just with some of the reflective practices that are encouraging meditation and rest, whether it be through prayer or other types of self-reflective practices or reflective practices, prayer circles or prayer groups where you can feel like you're in community with people. And or even just some of the rituals, for silence or solitude or rest that could be a form of self-care or healing. Right. Love and support. I know we talked about that too, feeling loved or feeling supported, especially those who have been historically marginalized or oppressed, or people who are grieving or people who are struggling through something. Religion can offer that sense of comfort and support in those times of struggle, in those times of adversity, in those times of oppression. And also, some religions, emphasize, the moral values around love and compassion and forgiveness and empathy. And those things can help people, human beings, develop values and principles that can help you to navigate those feelings of shame and stigma and anger and doing things in a more healthier way. So, and I say all of that to say, because we want to make sure that if that is something that you use as a resource, then that's what you're getting. That's what you're getting.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you think? Go ahead, Nikki.
No, because I'm listening to you just kind of describe some of the benefits for some who have been in more organized religion, groups. And, that sense of belonging and connection. I think back to, the different churches I've been in, and some of my friends to this very day I met, years ago in the church arena. Some people I network with for, career choices, and down to like, hey, I need someone to come and fix some plumbing in my house. You could find someone in the church aspect. It's been very resourceful, whether it's a church, a mosque, synagogue, what have you. Obviously, we're focusing more on the Black church here. But as far as looking at some of the beneficial aspects of the Black church, there have been a lot. And, it's a place where, for some, especially us as Black people, we learn how to play the drums or the piano or hit that first note, not to be scared, but to get in front of the congregation and to sing. I'm not a singer, but, I think about a lot of my friends who learned to connect with their voice and their sound, and they're singers to this day. And it happened in the Black church. There are a lot of secular singers now and artists and musicians and rappers, and they all can track back their history of being in the church. And it's very family oriented sometimes for some. It's not just you and mom, it's you and mom and grandma and auntie and uncle, going to the same church. And for those who it's been beneficial for you personally, for your family dynamic, and even currently, we honor you in that aspect. And so thank you, Jonathan, for kind of giving us an overview and saying, hey, for some, religion and church experience is a good experience. But I'm pretty sure, you're going to go a little bit deeper and describe what it looks like for those when that's not their story.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Hugh, did you have anything to share on this piece, or what do you think about it?
I'm like, I love, that we provided this ability to connect through religion, and so that our audience understands that we're not here to be a judge, jury, to indict. We're here to simply provide a resource and a community. So I love everything that y'all have been saying.
Yeah, and it's very important because primarily our audience is Black people, and I want to validate that and acknowledge that most Black people, especially in the United States and America, have a very strong spiritual orientation, and that spiritual orientation and that connection to religion was a major aspect of life, for especially during the slavery era.
Yes.
In terms of having those very charismatic and highly emotional religious services, it was very important to our ancestors in dealing with the oppression that was going on during those years of slavery. And many of our ancestors during that time, the church, or that Black church, was that outlet for expressing feelings of, being humiliated, being degraded, being, experiencing pain and all these different things. It was an outlet for them. And I also want to back this by saying that there was I think I shared this with both of you all. There was a study 2014 on the religious landscape study conducted by the Pew Research Center, where it said 8 in 10, which is about 79% of African Americans, self-identify as Christian.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Say that again. Say that statistic again.
Roughly 8 in 10, which is 79% of African Americans, self-identify as Christian.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, I would have thought 100%, but
it feels like that because it's everywhere, right? I know we're talking about particularly the Black church, but if you think about it, it's everywhere. And I think about people who are not believers in Christianity. I think of people who are atheists or don't subscribe to any religion or any spirituality or any belief system outside of themselves, and I can imagine what it's like for them seeing things everywhere. You go into the store, it's on our dollar bill. It's on TV around the holiday, the fall holidays. Things are very religious. Things are very Christian driven or what have you. And so, it is everywhere. And sometimes, it's very easy for people to assume, oh, you Black? I'm Black. Hey, sis, you going to church on Sunday? Don't even know my name, don't know anything about me. There's an assumption. It's almost like a silent head nod, if you will, that if you're Black and I'm Black, then, we have to be churchgoers. We have to be Christian. We have to be ones that, subscribe to the faith, because I know you're not Black and not believing, as they say. And so that number, that percentage, that statistic is staggering. And I agree with Hugh. I would have thought it would have been higher, but that's still very high and very telling, especially as we dive deeper into the topic today.
Yeah, absolutely. It goes even, like, the data even speaks to as far as like the religious commitment to the church, in regards to it saying that African Americans were more religious than whites and Latinos.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Whoa.
It was like three quarters, 75% of Black Americans say that religion is very important in their lives, compared to smaller shares of whites at 49%, and Hispanics at 59%. And it goes even deeper in saying African Americans were more likely to attend services at least once weekly at 47%, and pray regularly at 73%. And then Black Americans, African Americans at 83% are more likely to say that they believe in God with absolute certainty than whites at 61 and 59%. So this data shows that this is, religion, Christianity is very important. It is part of the aspect of life, daily life, for many people who are Black. But in the church is continually serving numerous functions for members of the African American community in all different types of ways, in particular Christianity. And so as I provided this framework, and as I provided like this validation and an acknowledgement of how religion has produced a lot of positive effects for Black Americans, now I'm going to shift into how many of the teachings in religion have contributed to or exacerbated mental health problems, depending on the nature of those teachings. There are many people who have come into religions and churches, particularly within the Black community, that have espoused interpretations and religious doctrine that have had a harmful effect and impact on one's personal and family functioning. You know?
I'll bet.
And so as we go into this topic and this dialogue around religious trauma, that's where we're going. It is to know that there are some religious communities that still to this day view and believe that mental health issues are personal and moral failings. It's a failure, right? There are communities that still believe that mental illness is evil and sinful.
I would say that's the predominant. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I would say that's the predominant belief, actually.
Yeah. I mean, that is a fact, and that there are people in the faith who have been told to simply just pray about it or pray harder in order to be cured of major serious mental health conditions, such as anxiety or depression or post-traumatic stress. While there are others from those communities that have been told to only seek the help from the religious leader in the community, not mental health professionals.
I'm taking in a lot of what you're saying. And I think we've created a good framework. And, for those that are listening, bear with us, because we want to paint a picture and build a foundation to actually broach, which is, a very sensitive topic and a heavy topic, which is religious trauma, and religious trauma, particularly in the Black community. And while we believe everything we just uttered at this point in the podcast, as far as there are some beneficial components to being a part of a church system within the Black community, we're pulling the curtain back a little bit more. We're looking at 2022, and we're seeing a lot of things that are in society. I think, Jonathan, you talked about, in the pandemic, a lot of people started to step back and they started to breathe a little bit, and the dust has settled. And they started to evaluate some of the things that was happening within their church communities. And the fact is, as beautiful as it's been for some, others have experienced horrific things within some teachings within the Black church, within the models, some of the rules within the Black church, some of the leadership within the Black church. And I say that to piggyback from what you're saying, because of those things, people have been dealing with mental issues and mental health issues in particular. A lot of people have gone through, all type of disorders. And when it comes to how do I handle this within the Black church arena, they are being met with, well, just pray harder. They're being met with, well, that may be a demon. They're being met with, well, what sins are you partaking of? Perhaps that's what you're dealing with. Versus, okay, you've expressed this to me. Now, how can we get you some help and pray at the same time? And, this is a big issue, and we probably will do a podcast in the future, particularly on mental health issues within the Black church and how we handle that. But, we're just using this as an example to kind of, set the table, if you will, to some of the harmful things that occurs in some Black church communities. And it's unfortunate because we do have some issues to actually process through. And if we feel that everything is a demon, or I'm a sinful person and therefore this is why I'm dealing with this, then ultimately we won't get the help that we really need. And so I just wanted to kind of, pause with what you were saying and kind of pull it out some more and say
Yeah.
these are type of things that are actually going on in the church arena. It's not all glitz and glamour and beautiful community, gatherings for some. This is
Right.
what some people are dealing with.
Right.
And we can let go of a lot of that guilt that is really not ours to begin with. We can actually begin taking a step back and focusing on us and being able to reflect and heal in a way that's not constantly, creating even more wounds. And so even more just really lacerating pierces to the soul. And so yeah, like I just heard, like when Nikki was talking, I just kept thinking guilt, 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 guilt. And I just, that is something that even in my own childhood in the Black church, is something that's so, you know, it is every, you are horrible, you are guilty. And so this is a lot of the things that we're trying to accomplish in this, the goal of this podcast, one of the goals is to be able to just reflect on, go back to who we are and go back to our humanity, and being able to just sit with all of that and not, that all that shame, that just bath of it is just, it's being able to just kind of scrape that off of us and move forward.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for providing that perspective. And I just wanted to kind of give us some space, because this is a very, you know, us talking about, like me talking about the positive benefits and the effects of religion on one's mental health, and then kind of shifting into more of like the negative effects of religion on one's mental health, based upon the ways in which religious doctrine and interpretation of the doctrine can be used to create harm against people. Um, I wanted to invite in another question in regards to your Nikki and Hugh, your experiences, and I'll tap into. But in regards to your experiences, because this is what makes this very difficult, especially for us as Black people. In your experience, what would you say has been the biggest challenge or the obstacle that you may have seen in others, or maybe you have experienced yourself, in this idea of um, when I was presenting to you all about the content about, how religion has impacted Black people, African Americans, and this kind of positivity around it, and how this Christianity has been somewhat of a strong spiritual base for a lot of people who look like us, but then kind of deciding to leave that environment that would be otherwise harmful or abusive.
So you're saying, like, what was some of the things that stuck out to say, hey, it's time to kind of pull out of this?
How do you reconcile what I just shared about the church, the Black church, and how it has been such a cornerstone and a staple for us as Black people, but at the same time, because this is the challenge that we're facing with talking about religious trauma in the Black community. At the same time, you have had experiences of abuse and harm from this very institution that was supposed to protect you and keep you safe, or provide that, sense of trust and safety. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I'll just be totally honest. It is hard to reconcile that. It is very difficult as a Black woman especially because I'm pretty sure that percentage of uh, Black Americans that identify as Christian and are in the church, even more than whites or Hispanics, I would gather and just say that probably majority of that percentage are Black women. And as a Black woman who have been raised in church, who have my foundations in church and generationally, a generational foundation in the Black church, it is very hard to reconcile that. I have been taught since I was young that the Black church is a place of safety and support and resource, as we spoke about earlier, for all, for all. It is a place to be strengthened. It is a place to connect with God. It is a place to be saved from the sins of life. It is a place to give your all to Jesus. It is a place where you should be able to exist with your brothers and sisters in Christ. How do you reconcile when that is what you've been told from the pulpit to your house and your kitchen table when you're growing up, to now experiencing years and decades of abuse in these environments, disconnection, manipulation, gaslighting, twisting and perverting the scriptures so that the leadership can get their needs met through the sheep. How do you reconcile that? It's very hard to reconcile that. It is, because it's almost like you feel like you're operating in cognitive dissonance. It's like, well, I have these two different opposing thoughts, and I'm in the middle of the street. I don't know which one to choose. You know, it's like she loves me not. The Black church loves me, it loves me not. Pick a petal off the flower. Which one is it today? And I know my experience is not exclusive to just me. I believe there are a lot of listeners out here that feel the same way, especially Black women, where we have been raised in church and we've kept ourselves pure for the Lord and faithful to the Lord. And we've signed up for different ministries, and we've led prayer sessions, and we've volunteered endlessly many hours for children's church and waiting for your Boaz, you know, and things of that nature, and sowing your teens or your 20s or your 30s unto the Lord, only to be met with abuse and dealing with the traumatic effects, loss of community, and not being able to understand fully what you've experienced. And on top of that, dealing with family members and friends and peers within the Black church that invalidate your experience and make you feel like, well, you just need to pray a little harder. Have you fasted lately? Maybe if you fasted, you would get victory over the devil, victory over the enemy. These are the things that are said to those who have experienced the harmful things within the Black church. And to be honest, it is very difficult to reconcile. But reconcile we must in order to come into true liberation and freedom and safety from those harmful experiences.
Great answer, Nikki. That's very insightful and very powerful, but also very, it must have just, how to even just construct an answer to that question must have been very challenging as well. So, but I appreciate it being answered. And before I go into, you know, my experience, I want to extend to Hugh the same question, but in a way that is more linked to thinking about it from a perspective of like maybe growing up in a dysfunctional environment, and from the outside looking like the perfect image, or just like everything is going well and everything is going good, and you know, nothing is wrong with what's happening to the system or the environment that you're in. But when you go behind the scenes and you're in that experience, you're dealing with something else completely different. And how do you kind of reconcile or cope with having to manage both worlds of how life is being presented to the outside versus what you're experiencing on the inside?
Uh, yeah, it's a very, very it's just confusion, and it's an isolating experience as well, because it's an isolating experience, and it's just that, let's say, like, I remember I would all the time as a kid, I would, you know, I was in the choir, and it was just like I just couldn't understand why it was exactly like, the hellish experience I was having in my high school and middle school years. I couldn't understand why it was the exact same kind of exclusionary type of stuff, to the point that I just retreated. I remember I would go up to, there was like an empty part of the church. I'm freaking, it was like the third floor, and it was always the congregation would be in the first floor, and I would just, retreat um up there for, while my parents were down in the congregation during the service. And so I would retreat up there, and I'd spend the majority of all of the service pretty much hiding out there, especially once I, was probably around 15, 16, 17, that kind of age. So it's a very confusing, isolating experience. It's also trying to, when you're speaking of high school, there's a friend of mine that I grew up with, and I'm still friends with her to this day, but she is very much of a holy roller. And so, um, and she's very much bringing that into her professional work. And it's hard for me to, because I just don't actually support what she's doing, right? But she's a friend of mine that I've known since we were 14 years old. And so um it's supposed to be this really this community, and it just ends up being isolating. It just ends up being and I also feel like I couldn't, and I've tried to voice these things in the past, but I'm always kind of met with defensiveness. And so it's also something like, you can't um you almost have to like sever those ties, and that's just a very lonely experience. Even though she's probably going through whatever it is she is going through, but not necessarily sever the ties. But there's a lot of things that you feel like you should be able to communicate and be able to trust and be able to come together, and it's actually the thing that's really creating this major, 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 major rift. And so it's just an extraordinarily, the word that I just keep using, the word isolating, but it feels super lonely to just be in a world where we're supposed to be this way of congregating in that is supposed to be a place of safety and congregation. And it's actually, I don't want to say everything but it's maybe, for some people it is everything but. um and it turns out to be a place that you have to segregate yourself from. And so the word I'm just it's a confusing experience trying to reconcile that. It's a confusing, it could be lonely, it can be if you don't really have a place to go to figure all of this out, it's like, what do you do? And I'm kind of glad that luckily I've been able to meet y'all and have this place to kind of come together. But yeah, I mean, it's really, really, it's heartbreaking as well. It's just heartbreaking. It's like this world where you put, as Nikki was saying, and I'm not a Black woman, but you put all of yourself into it, and then it turns out, there's nothing behind the curtain that you can really, lay your head upon. So it's kind of, it can be a heartbreaking thing to kind of reckon with. Yeah, that's what I wanted to say.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing that. I was, just listening, and it is it's very hard to like even come up with what I wanted to share, because I think I'm gonna share something very personal in this moment, because for me, I think the day that I realized I realized that I was the day that I realized that I was living a lie,
Mm, mm,
that was the day.
mm.
Mm.
The day that I realized that my entire life,
Yeah.
even in my childhood, even before I even got into the religious environment, my entire life has been a multitude of being in unhealthy communities, in unhealthy systems, in unhealthy, toxic experiences, in traumatizing experiences. And it was that day when I was introduced to the truth. And it was when I actually started school to become a
Mm,
therapist. And I
mm-hmm.
started learning about trauma and learning about the symptoms and learning about the effects. And for a very long time, I held on to that information and I didn't act on it
Mm-hmm.
because I was so overwhelmed by what I was reading about related to trauma. I didn't know about religious trauma back then, but I was
Mm-hmm.
reading about trauma
Mm-hmm.
and uh, and this idea of, oh my God, am I going to have to start my life over again and rebuild again?
Wow.
I was going through a lot of anxiety. I was going through a lot of emotions once I came into contact with the truth.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
That I was being lied to, that I was being deceived, that I was being manipulated. Whether it
Mm-hmm.
be unintentionally or unintentionally, didn't matter where it was coming from, but that was my experience. And it was life shattering. It was devastating. It was, it had me feeling depressed, had me feeling sad. But I honestly did not. I wanted to put that awareness somewhere else. I did not want to deal with it. I did, and I just kept going. I kept going in it. It
Mm.
kept showing up and kept coming back because I could not, in my mind, make sense of what it was that I was experiencing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think so many people are in that spot that you're describing of how to make sense with what's going on. You know, you asked the question about how do you reconcile between what we knew as Black people, especially what the church is supposed to be for us, how connected we are to the church, to Christianity, sometimes more than other people groups. And yet there are things that have really, really abused and traumatized us. And there's so many people that are feeling like I have not been able to make sense of what I've been through. But I know I had to find safety. I know that I had to pull away because it was too much, And once you pull away, and like you said, when you started to learn a little bit more and just process a little bit more what you've been through, and you're like, wait a minute, something here is not right. How come the place that is supposed to be, um, the scripture that says, where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty?
Yeah.
And I used to hear so many people say, well, honey, you want that freedom, you need to be within the four walls of the church. Well,
Mm-hmm.
how come when I was in the four walls of the church, that's not what I experienced? And, we'll go deeper into what that looks like, but it's felt more bondage than it actually felt liberating. How come when I left out, there are a lot of people during the pandemic era, and that especially 2020, where we, were on quarantine and we really couldn't go anywhere. A lot of the churches were closed, and they said, how come I feel happier? How come I'm not struggling with flashbacks and nightmares and all of these things when I'm not in church? How come I feel more joy and more peace? How come I'm able to connect with my family members and be kinder to my spouse or my mom or dad when I'm not in church? I thought that's where the liberation was. This doesn't make sense. Well, if you guys stick with us, listeners out there, we're going to start unpacking more of this, not just in this episode and the subsequent episodes, because we really need to look at the why.
Yeah.
You know, we really need to look at the why. Go ahead.
And you know what? I was just going to say really quickly, the day, Jonathan, the day that I uncovered that lie, it was, my God, it was probably one of the most brutal days of my life. It was definitely, I use this analogy a lot, but it would definitely felt like just ripping a bed of nails that have been fastened into your skin. It's felt like just taking that out. And so, and for me, it's been not just in religious, but also in interpersonal dynamics, like in really toxic, horrible friendship dynamics. For me specifically, when Jonathan was talking about the lie, like the lie feels so powerful over you. And this is not, I wanted to say, this is not something that we know, this is not going to be something that's easy to be reckoned with. That is, you're undoing, you're putting the pieces of the puzzle together, and, the puzzle should be broken in half or whatever, so it's that lie is another thing that we're going to be able to not only make sense of, but also, really be able to kind of sit in our truth and sit in our own power. And because these lies served us at one point, but they definitely are never going to serve us in the long run. And so, that's just like, when you were talking about the lie, I mean, I can't speak enough about how we're going to clean this up, and that's okay. And we're going to be able to move forward.
Yeah, and I just wanted to speak to that lie just a little bit more.
Go ahead, Jonathan.
Because there's a lot in that, because even as a therapist, even as a mental health professional, when working with clients who have suffered trauma from their childhood or in any traumatic experience, they're contending with that lie. They're meeting that lie, especially as they separate from that system or separate from that family that have perpetuated that lie, and to have people believing that it was true. And in that lie, there is this reckoning that seems to occur when, especially with religious trauma, there is this reckoning, there is this kind of like coming to terms with how is it that this divine source, this divine power, that the religion that I am coming out of, Christianity, whatever religion it is, claiming to possess this divine power, and that this divine power, this divine source has so much meaning to me and my life as a human being that I would concede to an action and a behavior that I would not otherwise tolerate, such as accepting the abuse, such as accepting the injustice, such as sitting through that in the lie, enabling the abusive thinking, enabling the abusive behaviors, being one with the lie. How, like there's something that's happening in that lie, and you come to that place of reckoning within yourself to say, how could I have had this connection or this attachment with this source, but still tolerate this abuse in the same space? So there's this kind of like reckoning, this kind of like, okay, what do I do with this information? And I was just looking up, Marlene, Winell's work, the psychologist that coined the term religious trauma syndrome, and she talked about that there was two distinct ways that religious trauma can be traumatizing. One way is the endurance of the trauma and the spiritual abuse. And I'm talking about, when I'm talking about that lie, I'm talking about just enduring that long suffering that in that experience of the lie. And then she talked about leaving the faith or the religious community. Those are the two ways that religious trauma can be traumatizing, because and as far as the listener is concerned, there are people out there that are listening to this that have lived their entire life in a lie, in a community that was founded upon a lie. And they're not aware that they're living in the lie, that are being affected and impacted by the lie until they actually leave. That's when they become into a state of awareness around that. But at the same time, as you leave, you're going with that lie. You're leaving this environment. You leave with the lie. You leave the faith community, and then that sense of overwhelm and that sense of just confusion and disorientation happens, of having to not only come to terms with that lie, but then you have to rebuild and recenter yourself to figure out how you're going to create a life for yourself outside of the contents of the lie that was created for you within that faith or within that belief system. So that's traumatic, to an individual that might have experienced religious trauma. So I wanted to talk a little bit more about the religious trauma, but did you guys have anything to share as we move forward into this topic, or how are you all feeling so far?
No, I mean this is good. I think this would be a good time to speak about religious trauma and religious abuse and kind of show the distinctions between the two, because that is the lie. Sometimes we can't heal from what we don't acknowledge. If we don't know that there's a problem, how can we find a solution? And oftentimes the lie is that there is no problem, that this is just spiritual warfare. This is the enemy that is trying to mess with you. This is you not praying hard enough, not fasting enough, not reading your Bible enough. This is what that is. That is the lie. And for a lot of us in the Black church, these are some of the typical things that we hear when we start realizing something's not right. And we start to be vocal about it, whether to our family members or our friends or our spouses, or even the leadership in and of itself. We realize something's not right. We don't like how we feel after we leave the church. It's lingering, it's ruminating on us as far as what took place. And we really don't have the verbiage yet. We don't have the language. We can't really articulate our experience, but we know something's not right. And so a lot of times we endure. As a people, we have much resilience in us, down to the DNA level. We are a resilient, beautiful people.
For sure.
Hit us, like that toy balloon that, it's the bottom of it is very heavy. But if you punch it, it'll take the punch, but it's standing right back up in your face like what, And that's how we are. We've been through so much as a people, so we know how to survive. We know how to just get through, to make it through. But a lot of times, the lie is that everything is okay. It's just another thing we have to endure. We can get right back up. But we want to uncover some of those lies and say, the truth is, many of us have been experiencing religious abuse within the church arena, particularly within the Black church. And because we've experienced that abuse, we've been dealing with the traumatic effects, the kickback, the residual effects of being abused. And we want to talk about that. We want to unpack that. We want to give the listeners and the survivors out there some language, some context to make clear and give some clarity around your experiences so that we can take the next step towards healing and processing and freedom and liberation. So, I just want to, give that little disclaimer before you continue to share.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, we definitely need to talk about religious abuse and the difference in the trauma context. Hugh, did you have any other thoughts or
Uh,
shares?
I'm just like really eager to jump into because I feel like the lie is such a wonderful segue, and that's what we're here to bust. So I'm
Yeah, and that's good that we're kind of on this lie, and part of the recovery process is to defy it, is to disrupt it, defy it, is to question it, is to interrogate it, because the lie has been going on for so long, and and the lie is really to protect something. Well, that's why people lie, or that's why the lie keeps going. Is to protect something, but how do we remove the lie and move into the truth?
Go
ahead.
Jump in real quick, Jonathan, and say this, that sometimes within certain religions, and particularly within the Black church, based off of, how we interpreted the scriptures, what we were taught, what leadership we were under, doing exactly what we're about to do now has been considered demonic or wrong. To question, to reason, to evaluate, to peer into, to pull the curtain back. Oftentimes when we are in abusive churches, to critically think, to question, to reason, to talk about, to consider is deemed something that's being counterproductive, or something that's considered you're being obstinate. You're not being a part of the community and the leadership and ultimately what God wants. But it is okay to question. I just want to preface that and say that it is okay to question, especially if there's a possibility of abuse and trauma, even within the four walls of the church. It is okay to reason. It is okay to step back and to look and to learn and to educate ourselves so that we are putting ourselves first and we are making sure that our families are in safe spaces and that ultimately we are taking care of ourselves. So for those who may be listening and say, well, I don't question, I just follow what God says, what the leadership says, because I am an obedient person, and to question, I don't want to open the door for the devil to come and mess with my head. We wanted to spell that that's a lie within itself. On a human level, it is okay to question. It is okay to see, because when we see, then we can take the next step to acknowledge and to heal and to process and things of that nature. So this is a good thing that we're uncovering things today. Thank you for listening to Surviving the Black Church podcast with your hosts, Jonathan, Nikki, and Hugh. If you enjoyed today's podcast, we'd love for you to subscribe, rate, and give a review on Apple Podcasts. Don't forget to join us next week for another episode. Until next time, take care.